Hi, this is Jaideep Ganguly at Fusion Applied. Welcome to the lesson on reassigning a task in Oracle BPM. In this lesson, we look at a couple of different reassignment scenarios. I call the first one self-reassignment. This is a scenario where if a person is assigned a task and he decides that somebody else may be better suited to do the task, then he can reassign it to this other person. I call the second scenario reassignment by a supervisor. A lot of customers have asked us about how this works in Oracle BPM. This is where if a person is assigned a task and he can't act on it, maybe because he's on vacation or he falls sick, or maybe he's no longer in the organization. In this situation, a task may appear to be stuck in a place where nobody can act on it. What do you do in such a case? Can a supervisor or somebody in a supervisory role grab this task and reassign it to somebody else who can act on it? So we look at that. We learn about the out-of-the-box reassignment capabilities in Oracle BPM workspace to handle both of these scenarios. Next, we look at who can do the reassignments, what are the defaults, and how you can go about changing it. Lastly, we look at how to do reassignments using the BPM API. This may be of interest to teams who are thinking of building a custom work list to access BPM. We'll use a very simple BPM process to learn about reassignment. It's a vacation request approval process. I have two roles, staff and manager, and anybody in the staff role can submit a request, and then the request gets submitted to somebody in the manager role, and the manager can then approve it or reject it. Let's do a quick introduction to the team that's going to help us demonstrate some reassignment scenarios. I have Raymond. Raymond's going to be in the staff role and he's going to submit a vacation request. Marie and Deborah are Raymond's managers. Either of them can approve Raymond's vacation request. I have Frank. Frank is going to be process owner, and I'm using the default WebLogic user as the BPM process admin. Regarding the process owner and the BPM process admin, don't worry about these roles for now. I will cover those later on in the lesson. Let's start with a self-reassignment scenario first. I'm going to have Raymond, who's in the staff role. You see the staff and the manager roles here in the swim lanes. So Raymond in the staff role is going to submit a vacation request, and that request will get routed to managers here, right? And who are our managers here? We have two managers. We have Deborah and we have Marie. Let's say Deborah is going to claim that request. What does that mean? It means that she indicates she's going to work on the vacation approval process, and she decides to reassign this to Marie. This is where the self-reassignment comes in. Deborah is reassigning this herself to somebody else. Finally, Marie is going to look at the request and then approve it, and that will end the process. So now we look at a demonstration of how the self-reassignment works in Oracle BPM Workspace. I am going to log in as Raymond. Raymond, as you know, is in the staff role, and Raymond will be submitting a vacation approval request. Let me log in. Remember, the submit approval task was an initiator task, so we're going to find that under applications, vacation request approval process. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to type in the employee ID. Now this could have been coded based on the logged in user, but I've not done that, so I'm going to have to type that in. And let me enter the start date, 14th till the 18th. And I'm going to submit this request. Okay, let me log out. Now what's going to happen is this request will get routed to the managers. And who are our managers? Our managers are Deborah and Marie. So I'm going to log in as Deborah now, and I'm going to see that request come in. So let me log in as Deborah. I see the request. Let me click on it and let me claim it. Claim basically means that Deborah is indicating to other managers that she will be working on this vacation request, so that when they see this request in their inbox, they won't be able to act on it. It kind of locks it. Now after claiming it, let's say Deborah falls sick or she gets overloaded with a lot of other work and she can't get to this task. She has a need to reassign this task to somebody else. How can she do that? Deborah selects a task, clicks on Actions, and Reassign. And now here, remember Marie is the other manager, so she can pull up Marie and assign it to her. Now you'll notice that this dialog box is pretty open and you can pretty much pull up any of the users here. Robert, for example, and you can assign it to Robert and he would still be able to approve it. If you really wanted to restrict it to managers, then you have to do something called restricted assignments, and that's something I cover in another lesson. For now, let's just assign it to Marie. Search. Click OK. Now let's log out and we log in as Marie. And Marie sees that and she can now approve it. Let's look at scenario 2 now. This is reassignment by a supervisor. Again, we have Raymond, who is in the staff role, and Raymond is going to submit a vacation request. So he submits a vacation request and that request gets routed to managers. So who are our managers? We have Deborah and Marie, two managers. Let's say Deborah claims the request. Now after claiming the request, Deborah falls sick. What does that mean? Does that mean this request is now stuck with Deborah until she comes back? Or is there a way that a supervisor can now grab it from Deborah while she's away and reassign it to Marie so that the work can continue? Let's continue on and look at how this is done in Oracle BPM. So let's go ahead and create our scenario for reassignment. I'm going to log in as Raymond. Raymond, as you know, has the staff role and he wants to submit a vacation request. So Raymond logs in, clicks on Applications, clicks on the vacation request process. Now I could code it to get the employee ID and name, but for the purpose of this exercise, I've not really done that, so I'm just going to type that in. Vacation starts on the 14th till the 18th, and I'm going to submit that. We log out. So what happens now is that the request gets routed to the manager role. And who do we have as managers? We have Deborah and we have Marie as managers. So either of them can log in there. They're going to see the request and they can approve or reject it. So let me log in as Deborah. Log in. And I see the request. Let's click on it and get the details. Now let's say Deborah claims it. So what does claim mean? A claim is a way for Deborah to indicate to the other managers that she is working on this request. She will be the one who's going to approve or reject it. So it locks it. The other managers can see it, but they are not going to be able to approve or reject that request. So Deborah's now claimed it and she plans on working on it the next day. But the next day, Deborah falls ill and she does not come into work. Maybe she might not be able to come into work for a couple of weeks. Now she's claimed it, so no other manager can actually work on this at this point. No other manager can approve or reject it. So is this vacation request stuck with Deborah until she comes back and works on it? Or is there a way to get this task reassigned from Deborah to some other manager? Actually, there is a way. There are two roles that we'll talk about. The first one is a process owner role. Every BPM process has its own process owner role, and this role has close to administration privileges just for that process. And the second role is the BPM process admin role, and this role is an administration role for the whole BPM environment. And either of these roles could be used to do reassignment in a situation like ours. So we can log in as a process owner and take this task and reassign it to some other manager. So before I show you how you can use a process owner role to reassign this task from Deborah to some other manager, let me quickly show you how the task ownership looks in JDeveloper and what the relationship is between a task owner and the process owner that we talked about. So I'm in JDeveloper now, and let's open the approve vacation request task. Let's look at the owner field. It's set to application role and the name of the role is human workflow reassignment.process owner. The first part is the same as the project name of the BPM project, and then you have process owner after that. You could also directly associate this task owner with a user or a group, but what I have done is I've left it at the application role, and in the BPM administration console I have associated one of my users with this role. Let me now quickly show you how I've associated one of my users, Frank, with the process owner role. I'm going to log into BPM workspace now as somebody who has the BPM process admin role, In my case, that's WebLogic. So we'll log in as WebLogic. Login. If you have the BPM process admin role, you will see an administration link up here. You click on that and you see roles. You see the human workflow reassignment roles. That's the project that I'm using. So you see the human workflow reassignment.process owner, and that's been set to Frank. Let me see how I did that. Come into this panel here, click on this, select that, come into the lower panel and go new members, and you use this select him and click on OK. Now because I have him selected already, I'm going to cancel out of this. But that's where a user has been associated with the process owner role. Let me log out now and summarize where we are. We have Raymond, who has the staff role, who submitted a vacation request. The request got routed to the managers, and Deborah, who's one of the managers, she picked it up and she claimed it. But she fell sick, so she can't come into work anymore. And we are trying to find out a way to reassign it now from Deborah to somebody else. I'm now going to log in as Frank, who is a process owner, and do the reassignment. Log in. One thing to note is that Frank will not see this task in his default inbox. He has to click on administrative tasks, and there he can now reassign it. Before we go there, you'll see that he can also approve and reject the task himself. That's because he's a process owner. But let's not do that now. Let's just reassign it to some other manager. Actions, reassign. Okay, and I'm going to reassign it to Marie, who's the other manager. Now you'll see that this reassignment is pretty open. Although in this case I am selecting Marie, who is the other manager, this does not stop you from selecting anybody. You could select any of the users in the organization. So if I take off Marie from here and do a search, I see all users here. So I could select just about anybody and it'll work. The process would just work fine. Now, if there is a reason why you want to really restrict it to a specific group, there is a restricted assignment setting on the human task, but we'll look at that in another lesson. For now, let's just select Marie and do the reassignment. Click on OK. And let me log out now. Let me log in as Marie now and check if I can see the vacation request task. Again, and yes, I do see the task, and I can also see that the approve and reject buttons are now enabled. That means I can do that. Now one more interesting thing I'd like to show you here is the assignment history. So I can see that this task was reassigned by Frank and assigned to Marie. And if I go in here and select show all, I can see the whole history. I can see that it was assigned to the human workflow reassignment manager. and it was acquired by Deborah, and then it was reassigned by Frank to Marie. So this is pretty cool to see, to be able to see the whole history behind the assignment of this task. I'm going to collapse that again and approve it, and that takes care of the reassignment and the vacation request for Raymond. So we've seen two reassignment scenarios, the self-reassign and reassignment by a supervisor. Let's see now how we can control the privileges for who can do these reassigns. Let's go back into JDeveloper and open our BPM project. Go under SOA content and you should see the approve vacation request human task there. Let's open that. Let's click on the Access tab, and this is where the privileges for human task actions are controlled from. You will see that if you go up, see all the human task actions, approve, reject. If you go down, you'll see reassign there as well. You'll see that by default, the reassign is checked for the admin, the assignees, and the owner. Because it is checked for the assignees, in scenario 1, Deborah could reassign it to Marie. And because it is checked for owner, in scenario 2, Frank could reassign it from Deborah to Marie. If you wanted to prevent Deborah from being able to reassign it to Marie herself, then you would check that off from under assignees. This section may be of interest to teams who are building custom work lists and want to know how reassignments can be done using the BPM API. I'm not going to go over all the details of writing a custom work list here. That will be covered in another lesson, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where the methods for reassignment are in the API. So let's go over the code that I'm using to do the reassignment. Let me scroll up. So let's look at the workflow client config file. This is the file where I have the location to my SOA server and my credentials. So I have that file, and then I'm creating the BPM service client factory, passing in the configuration file, and then I'm getting the workflow service client from the factory, create the BPM context. Now notice I'm passing in all nulls here. That's because I have my credentials passed in the client config. Then I'm using the iTask query service to get the task. I create a task assignee instance, passing in the name and the type. The type can be user, group, or application role, and the name would be the name of the user, group, or application role. I create a list and add the assignee into the list. Then I get the iTask service, and the reassign task method is on the iTask service, and that's where I do the reassign. So I'm going to attach this file to this lesson, and you should be able to download it to have a closer look. We're at the end of the reassignment lesson, and let's summarize what we've learned. By default, the assignee, the process owners, and the admin can do reassignment. If you want to change these defaults, you can do that from the access settings for the human task. And finally, if you don't want to keep the reassignment open, then you can use a restricted assignment setting on the human task. I'll cover the details of how to do that in another lesson.